They called it a lesson in anatomy, but it was an execution, and I was the exhibit. The room was cold with calculation, no warmth, no reverence, only data points, scalpel arms, and rows of multi-eyed observers perched like silent vultures. The air thrummed with artificial gravity and humming walls of glass. On the elevated stage stood the body still breathing, barely, human, male, shackled at the wrists and throat. His name was Rian Kale, last survivor of Outpost 17C on the frontier moon Nolax. The Flary Imperium had overrun it 6 days ago. He'd watched comrades burn and vacuum and bleed dry beneath alien sun blades. Now, he stood center stage on the K-Thory educational dreadnought at Cherylix, the so-called seat of learning for over 17 systems, and today's lesson, how to kill a human. Rian didn't know their language, at least, not fluently, but he recognized enough, saw the diagrams, the dissection holos, the clicks of interest, the low purrs of curiosity. He was a specimen, not a prisoner, not anymore. At the front of the theater, the lead instructor, a 7-limbed hybrid named Profex. Ulver circled the stage, gesturing with 2 translucent limbs as it spoke to the auditorium. The human's throat organ produces vibrational noise for mating and aggression rituals. Here, sliced beneath the chin, upward into the brainstem, Rian's fist clenched, chains rattling. They hadn't broken him, not yet, but they wanted him to see it, feel it, know it, the helplessness, the extinction in real time. This was no war now. It was study, genocide repackaged as curriculum. Somewhere beyond the chamber's cold wall of glass, Earth was a whisper, a rumor buried under light years, an enemy blockade. No signals had pierced through in months. No aid had arrived. Humanity wasn't dying in fire or glory. It was being dissected. Rian was 32 standard years old, born in the rain slums of Virel Station, raised among welded cargo holds and rusted modules. The son of a hydro-salvager and a dead mother he only knew from a cracked photo. He'd enlisted in the Interstellar Defense Corps not to fight but to leave. He never imagined it would be like this, that the Great War would end not in explosions or resistance, but in silence. But this wasn't silence now. Ulvar gestured. The stage shifted. A new tool glinted under the lights, a vibrating scalpel, molecularly sharp, a whisper away from his neck. This concludes the theory segment. The professor rasped. Observe the practical. The assistant moved, and Rian, still breathing, still human, spoke. You're doing it wrong. A sound wave, a voice, a violation. The auditorium froze. Clicking ceased. Breathless murmurs rolled like a wave across the alien class. No human had spoken up during execution. Most didn't live that long. Ulvar tilted his head. You comprehend? Rian's voice cracked, but it carried. Not just comprehend. I understand. He locked eyes with the professor. A scar under his left eye twitched, the same scar he got pulling a child from a collapsed station wall. His words came clearer now, forged in rage. You want to know how to kill a human. You're using scalpels and charts. But that's not how we die. You don't kill us with blades. He stepped forward, despite the chains, despite the pain. You kill us when you take our hope. The alien class stared. One juvenile's note tendrils began twitching rapidly. Data was being recorded, but no one spoke. Rian did. You burn our cities. You glass our planets. You erase our names. You teach the next generation that we're insects to dissect. But that's not how it ends. The assistant paused. The scalpel lowered. See, the thing about humans, Rian grinned a bloody grin, crooked and true. We don't die when our hearts stop. We die when the last of us forgets, and I haven't forgotten anything. He yanked on the chains. A loud creak echoed. The auditorium lights flickered. Then somewhere in the ceiling above, unnoticed until now, came a sound. A click, then another, and another. One by one, tiny black nodes flicked open, insectal shapes, with glowing eyes dropped into the shadows, stealth drones, human-made, one after another, blinking, active, motionless, watching. Ulvar turned slowly. What is this? Rian looked up, blood dripping from his lip. The lesson's not over. His smile widened. You taught them how to kill a human. He nodded toward the drones, hundreds. Awake now, watching. Now let me teach you what happens after. The silence didn't last long. Within seconds, the sterile theater, once a calm cathedral of dissection, fractured. Cold containment lights flushed crimson. Students clattered out of their seats, translating fear through dozens of alien languages. Security drones unfolded. From ceiling recesses like metal wasps, a field of static shimmered into place around the stage. But Rhea and Kale didn't flinch, still chained, still bleeding, still defiant. The lecture chamber had become a crucible, and its burning core, the Larry Professor, Ulver, recoiled from the human, the creature's long spine flexed, limbs shifting protectively over its thorax, until moments ago it had radiated. Control clinical, superior, untouchable. Now it stood one breath away from panic. Subdue the subject, it hissed in native clicks. The theater translated with artificial calm. Purge the anomaly. Execute immediately. Defense turret snapped. From hidden vaults in the floor, rotating toward Rhea's exposed chest, white coils of energy began to glow at their muzzles. He raised his chin, still doing it wrong. He said, voice dry but steady, a dozen alien eyes narrowed. Confusion, calculation, even a flicker of fascination. No human should be talking. Then the drones dropped, small, black, insect-like one by one, silently from the ventilation ducts. Dozens of them, some hovered, others perched in the rafters like patient ravens, all focused on him. And then projection, the room bathed in a flickering blue haze. Holographic static resolved into a woman's face, Admiral Shiravas, scarred, silver-eyed, speaking from a time long gone. If you're seeing this, then they've made a school of your suffering. Good. That means they're watching. You can teach anatomy, you can diagram nerves, but you'll never understand what makes a human until you feel what we've buried. In our bones, defiance, memory, fire. The drones chimed once, then went dark, cloaked, gone. Shock echoed through the audience. Ulver's limbs twitched. Disable all unauthorized tech. It snarled. Eliminate the subject. This is no longer instruction, this is infection. The turrets fired, but the beams never landed. From deep inside the Echeriolix, a muffled explosion thundered through the deck. The entire theater lurched. Students were flung from balconies. Walls flickered and dimmed. Grav stabilizers moaned under strain. An alert rang through the ship's intercoms. Core detonation detected. Auxiliary thrusters offline. Breach in Research Wing B7. Ulvar spun toward the control node. Find the source. Rhea moved. Not far, but far enough. Chains cracked. As he dug behind the steel dissection table, an explosion of sparks from a failed turret briefly lit the room. One of the human drones descended cloaked, silent, in a flash of silver light. It cut the shackles from his wrists. He was free and bleeding, but alive. The assistant surgeon, a towering six-limbed creature with obsidian bone plating, lunged at him, ready to silence this anomaly. Rhea didn't think. He remembered. One step to the left. Duck. Use the momentum. He grabbed the falling scalpel, reversed the grip, and drove it straight into the alien's throat cluster. A burst of viscous blue fluid sprayed the glass walls. The creature twitched once, then collapsed. Rhea turned, gasping. Around him, chaos, smoke, and fractured light. Turrets malfunctioning. Students fleeing, and above, the ceiling crack-tripped, apart as if by the hands of a god. Hours earlier, while the aliens debated posture and pressure points, Rhea had triggered a beacon hidden in his ribcage, a subdermal transmitter, encoded with an ancient human signal vanguard protocol. Alpha. Wake. The signal was meant to reach ghosts, not fleets, not formal reinforcements, but the remnants, the broken, those who had vanished into the black, and it had been heard. Now, they were coming. Beyond the dreadnought, space trembled. From the dark between stars, a fleet of silent ships emerged, black hole, unregistered, forgotten vessels. They had no insignias, no IFF, no warnings. These were vanguard ships crewed by war orphans, high outlaws, deserters who never deserted humanity, and now they moved as one, weapons armed, shields raised, and then they opened fire. Inside the theater, Rhea grabbed a fallen alien plasma rifle, heavy, clunky, but usable. He turned toward the stage, the alien audience scattering around him in terror. You taught a class on how to kill us, he said, voice rising through smoke and static. Let me give my lecture. He raised the weapon, then froze. A child stood alone in the smoke, alien, female, young, thin arms trembling as she held up a learning pad, not a weapon. She couldn't have been more than 10 cycles old. Her skin was pale azure, her eyes wide, unblinking, were fixed on him, not with fear, but with wonder. Rhea lowered the rifle slightly. You don't run. She shook her head. I want to learn. He blinked, in her voice, he heard echoes of himself. Viril Station, Age 9, crouched behind a shattered bulkhead, clutching a broken radio, trying to hear Earth's last news. He lowered the weapon fully. Then start with this, he said softly. Humans don't die when you kill them, we die when we stop remembering. A beat. Then the wall behind him exploded inward. The Vanguard boarding team had arrived. The smoke parted like a curtain, torn by plasma wind and rupture shock. Then came the sound of boots, human boots. Boots that hadn't walked these polished flary halls in years. Not since the fall of Sector 9. Not since the last treaty. Turned to ash, they were back. The first through the breach was Captain Idris Harlan, face half-shadowed beneath a scorched helm, one eye gleaming with an ocular implant made from a crashed alien sensor core. Behind him, Vanguard operatives poured in silent, lethal, most barely human anymore. One of them had no face, just a breathing mask etched with the Earth sigil. Another bore an exosuit stitched together from 3 enemy species armor plating. These weren't soldiers, they were survivors with nothing left to lose. Harlan swept his rifle across the ruined chamber, eyes finding Rian amid shattered glass and debris. Kale, he growled, voice modulated through a cracked throat piece. Status, breathing, bleeding, improvising, Rian said, rising. From behind cover, about the usual. Harlan's mouth curled in the barest trace of a smile. You always did like theatrics. I was being dissected. Exactly, dramatic, above them. The Echeriolix groaned as another volley struck. Somewhere deep in the hull, atmosphere vented into space. Alien voices screamed over failing intercoms, and through it all, the child, the young alien girl with the recorder still watched, hidden behind the cracked observation console. She didn't run. She pressed record. The Vanguard split into assault squads, each moving with brutal purpose. Target, archives, communications core, anatomy vaults. Each corridor they took had once cataloged human vulnerabilities, muscle contractions, sensory delays, psychological fracture thresholds. Data used to destroy Terran colonies, one by one. Now those halls ran red with retaliation, and Rian walked through them like a ghost returning to haunt his own autopsy. This wasn't a military base, he said as they advanced. No, Harlan answered. It was worse. It was a school. Rian turned to a shattered glass panel etched in gold alien script. The translation was still legible. Department of Human Mechanics and Tactical Dissection. It made his jaw clench. They turned genocide into curriculum. 3 levels down, the team breached the central cortex, a cathedral of thought where alien professors stored neuromap behavioral blueprints of humans, rage triggers, empathy traps, stress decay curves. Rian froze when he saw the central vault. The human brain, kept alive in nutrient gel, electrodes laced deep through gray matter. It pulsed faintly, even now. Harlan read the data plate. Subject to 2A. Extracted during cryotransfer. Neural net still active. Looks pre-war. Who? Rian asked. Voice thin. Harlan scanned. Roslyn, Ava Roslyn. Rian staggered. Back a step. The name hit like shrapnel. I knew her, he said. She led the Exodus fleet over Centauri Prime. She was the one who cracked the Korg cipher. She taught us how to fight. Now they're studying her mind like a circuit board. Rian stepped forward. He placed his palm against the glass. The brain twitched. Not a spasm. A pattern. Morse code. SDILLHERE. Harlan blinked. She's alive. Cognitively active. Trying to communicate. Another signal flashed stronger now. THEREMORE. Rian's voice dropped to a whisper. More brains. More minds. Trapped. Stored. Used. Harlan turned to the squad. New objective. Free the damned. It became a prison break. In vault after vault. They found them. Human consciousnesses trapped in suspension. Some digital. Others biological. Some no longer had bodies to return to. Some had memories fractured by decades of isolation. But they were still human. And they were still fighting in silence, in pulses, in code. The Flairi had tried to erase humanity by learning us. But in doing so, they preserved our most dangerous weapon, memory. Rian activated a mass unlock sequence. Dozens of life support. Canisters flickered green. Neural links severed. Cryocores hummed back to self-regulation. The lights flickered. The cortex screamed. In the outer hull, sirens blared in multiple dialects. Quarantine breach. Genetic contamination. Human consciousness expanding. The alien systems had no protocol for what came next. Because this was a war. This was resurrection. Across the fleet, the signal spread. Other human remnant cells buried in data cores. AI fragments shamed into dormancy. Half-born minds in enemy labs heard the call, and they woke up. One in the Cavari Nebula, another beneath the ice moons of Rom 7. Scattered seeds, now flowering in rebellion, a storm of ghost code riding the stars. They'd studied how to kill humans for decades, but they never studied what happens when a human refuses to die. Back in the shattered cortex, the child approached. She walked carefully between the flickering consoles, stepping over blood and broken glass. Her recorder was still running. She looked up at Rian. Is this the lesson? He knelt beside her. Gaze steady. No, this is the beginning. She frowned. Of what? Rian looked toward the breach where the stars outside still burned. Of remembering who we are. Behind him, the brain of Ava Rosalind blinked once more. One final signal. BRINGTHEFIRE. And so they did. The stars looked different now. What was once a cold, unchallenged sky choked with alien ships, beacons of control and superiority was suddenly contested. Human signal flares carved through the black, each one a pulse of defiance. The vanguard fleet, once scattered and dormant, had rallied, and worse for the Tleri, they had awakened something they couldn't quantify. Hope, and hope, to them, was chaotic. From the smoking husk of the HFY, Rian stood at the breach, visor up, wind from the broken atmospheric seals whipping through his hair. Beside him, Harlan locked his eyes on the horizon on the enemy dreadnoughts aligning along the orbital perimeter. They're bringing in the anatomy arcs, Harlan muttered. Rian's blood chilled. The Anatomiracs weren't soldiers, they were judges. Walking monstrosities of bone and machinery, engineered not just to kill, but to unmake. They restructured the battlefield, rewrote genetic codes in real time, and harvested survivors for study. Where they walked, planets became cautionary tales. The message was clear. This wasn't a correction. This was a purge. Aboard the alien flagship, Admiral Seker Yuvra, first to the Tleri directive, stood in absolute silence. 10 limbs folded behind its back, mandibles tight with measured fury. It stared at the holographic feed of the human-led uprising. Protocol failed. One of the adjuncts murmured, the human subject inside of mass decryption, multiple cognitive cores lost. Sections of the HFY now irrecoverable. Seker's voice was cold, deliberate. We built a cathedral of their weakness. We carved their death into curriculum, and yet, it paused. They still write their own endings. The room shifted uneasily. Mobilize the void choir. No more observation. Reduce them to biology. Back on the HFY, Rian stood before the surviving liberated minds, some digital, some regrown into cloned shells. Admiral Ava Rosalind, now partially restored into a hard-light projection, hovered before them like a spectral general. I remember every one of their lectures, she said, voice trailing with static. Every blade they used to pry us apart, every chemical, every cut, every lie. They don't just want to win, they want to erase the shape of our resistance. Harlan grunted. They failed. No, she said. They adapted. She turned her gaze to Rian. They're sending the Anatomiracs and the void choirs. They'll rewrite the field in seconds. Your suits will fail. Your mind shatter. And what would you have us do? Harlan asked, jaw tight. Something they still don't understand. Rosalind said, you bleed. You suffer. And then you rise again. Across the shattered station, the humans began preparing. No grand fleet. No planetary defenses. Just remnants hackers stitching virus code into alien uplinks. Soldiers welding together hybrid weapons from broken labs. Children carrying messages through fire-blackened corridors. Even the young alien girl, now called Sela, refused evacuation. I've watched your lessons, she told Rian as she helped carry parts to the fusion deck. And I've watched theirs. I think I've learned something more. What's that? Rian asked. She looked up at him. You love louder than they hate. He didn't have words for that. He just nodded. Sometimes children saw the clearest. Then the sky broke. The Tleri fleet moved in a formation not of conquest, but of cleansing. The void choir sang across subspace frequencies, fracturing local comms. Anatomiracs descended in beams of violet entropy, their presence warping gravity itself. One landed on the HFY platform, 9 meters tall. Its limbs were segmented like an autopsy armature. Its torso bloomed with whirring bone saws, neurospikes, and languages encoded in pure pain. It spoke through multiple mouths. Your species has been archived. Return to silence. Harlan raised his weapon. So archive this. They opened fire. It wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. Rian fought with nothing left to lose. His suit failed early, overcharged by a sonic pulse, but he kept going, grabbing a scorched plasma axe from the ground and driving it through one of the Anatomirich's limbs. Harlan launched himself onto its back, wiring a bomb straight into its spinal cord before being thrown 50 meters into a bulkhead. Ava Roslin coordinated the counterstrike, directing Vanguard units through Hardlight nodes, using the very schematics the aliens had built to dissect humans and turning them into maps for vengeance. But it wasn't enough. One by one, humans fell, exploding in white fire, crushed beneath gravity distortion, dissolved by entropy gas. And yet, they kept fighting, because the enemy still hadn't learned the one truth. Humans don't fight to win. They fight to remember. Then came the turn. The digital minds, still unstable, launched a final fail-safe code named Nebersky, a virus, written by human minds under torture, hidden in subroutine stutters across dozens of neural cores. Now, finally, activated, it infiltrated the void choir. The singers turned on themselves. They screamed in corrupted harmony. The anatomiric paused its movements, glitching long enough for Harlan, broken and bleeding, to detonate the spinal charge. The monster collapsed in on itself. Smoke, screams, silence, then cheering. Rian collapsed to his knees beside the wreckage, shaking, armor fused to his flesh. The victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. He looked up to the young girl's cell is still standing. Why didn't you run? She blinked. Because I believe you now. The sky had bled itself empty. What remained above the scorched ruin of the Echerielix was not victory, but silence. Suspicious, eerie silence. No more void choirs. No more anatomiracs. Just the echo of broken hulls and dying stars drifting through the husks of what was once a classroom built to deconstruct humanity. Captain Idris Harlan lay in medlock, half his bones replaced by reactive scaffolds, lungs breathing through emergency gel. He didn't open his eyes when Rian entered. Tell me we lost. Harlan rasped. Rian hesitated. We're still breathing. That it's not over. In the aftermath of the battle, the liberated digital minds fragments of Roslin, Ken, Mercer, even pieces of lost Terranate began reconstructing something ancient, something buried beneath decades of erasure, buried in code, in myth, in memory, a weapon, but not like theirs, not entropy bombs or collapsed drives, not orbital lances or void storms. This was something far older, Project Ashenvale, Roslin's. Hardlight projection reappeared in the chamber where Rian sat, poring over schematics half-scorched by alien claws. Her image flickered between her younger self and the fractured ghost that Clary had tried to store. You've read the reports, she said. Rian nodded. Rumors only, a myth. Something born in the fall of Europa Station. Not born, Roslin said. Unleashed. She gestured, and the chamber darkened. A projection flickered to life Earth just before the collapse. A voiceover, old and worn. If humanity falls, let it fall into myth. Let the stars fear our memory more than our survival. The image shifted an ancient payload, hidden in the crust of a Martian moon. Biocode, infused with AI cores fused to human neural patterns. A weapon that was not a machine, nor a mind but a story, written into the fabric of space-time. Rian stared. It was never meant to win a war. No, Roslin said. It was meant to make sure we were never forgotten. They had to reach the Helix core relic from before the treaties, before Earth burned, buried in the Clary vaults beneath Ekarthus, a gravity-shattered planetoid used as a memory prison. No human had ever returned from it, but now they had a map extracted from Roslin's fractured consciousness, and they had a purpose. Rian volunteered before the sentence even finished leaving her mouth. Harlan, awake now and strapped into a support frame, tried to argue. You won't come back from this. I don't care. You should. Rian paused. I died once, Harlan, on a table, while they taught aliens how to end my kind. This time, I walk in knowing who I am. The old soldier met his eyes, then nodded, then burned bright. Brother. The journey to Ekarthus was a descent into the bones of forgotten wars. The Vanguard cutter asphalt-pierced radiation belts and hyperfield debris, the wreckage of failed human assaults drifted around the planetoid like gravestones. Old warships that resolve, Mila's knife, first light teach a chapter of loss. Inside the ashfall, Rian and a strike team of 4 moved in silence. They weren't elite soldiers, They were remnants. A deaf engineer named Cora with implants, built from alien waste. A priest turned hacker who still wore a broken crucifix inside his hard suit. A girl barely 16 who hadn't spoken since her family was vaporized at Epsilon Gate, and Sella, the young alien child who insisted on coming. No, Rian had told her, "It's not your war." "It is now," she replied. "You taught me something." What? She looked at him with ancient eyes for someone so young. That the worst thing the galaxy can do is teach a child how to kill a human and then let her see what one really is. They breached the prison vaults of Ekarthus under cloak, shadows drifting through gravitational instability. The helix core pulsed beneath layers of alien theology halls carved not for function, but for intimidation. Flaring murals stretched overhead, depicting human surrender, vivisection, execution. Propaganda rendered in obsidian and light. At the center, encased in crystal and restrained by alien resonance fields, the core. Rian stepped forward, breath slow, heart steady. It recognized him. Input recognized. Human. Directive active. Memory is resistance. The walls trembled. "Do you seek activation? Warning. Galactic destabilization likely?" Sella's voice was quiet behind him. "What does it mean?" Rian looked to her. "It means if we can't win the war, we become the warning." He placed his hand on the core. Authentication accepted. Ashenvale. Primed. Suddenly, the planetoid screamed. Lights surged. Plary wards collapsed. The echoes of ancient Terran voices began flooding the network. Every genocide, every rebellion, every stand, recorded in pulses of data and emotion and blood. It wasn't just history. It was vengeance coded in remembrance. From orbit, Rosalind's voice reached Rian's ears. "Are you ready?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "Then let the galaxy remember us." In the skies above Ekarthus, the stars began to shift. Flary ships faltered, caught in the cascading quantum resonance of Ashenvale. Across their homeworlds, propaganda archives began erasing themselves. Overwritten by us by human voices, human faces, human fire. And every time an alien child asked, "Who were they?" the answer would echo, "The ones you tried to forget and failed." There is no sound in vacuum. The Flary taught their young. Only silence in which victory is measured. But now the stars rang with voices not their own. From the dark edges of the Flary Imperium, across bastions and hive worlds, once secure in their dominance, came a tide of echoes. Human echoes, memories unleashed by the helix core. Not screams, not threats, but songs, last words. Broadcasts from fallen colonies. Laughter before extinction. Defiance in the face of genocide. And everywhere, one phrase pulsed through every signal and subspace layer. We remember. The Ashenvale had awakened. Not a weapon but a reckoning. Inside the shattered ruins of Ekarthus. Rian stood at the epicenter of it all, still wired to the helix core. Pupils flickering with residual light. His mind bore centuries of memories and seconds. Entire lives downloaded. A million deaths whispered across the edges of his thoughts. He could feel them. Earth before the fall. Mars during the siege. Families on Europa. Engineers on Io, children on Hollow Reach. He wasn't alone anymore, and it was breaking him. Sella knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to disconnect the neural relay. "You have to stop. Your mind isn't built for this." "I have to finish it," Rian murmured. "They need to see who." He opened his eyes, blood lining his vision. Everyone, above, in orbit. The ashfall had gone dark. Admiral Ava Rosalind's hard light projection flickered in and out. As the alien countermeasures began jamming the liberated networks, the Flary had realized, too late, that the veil wasn't a virus that could quarantine. It was a cultural contagion, and they'd triggered their final defense, the voice of unmaking, an elder war form, one not seen in millennia, a construct born before the Flary had language, before their directive ruled, before they feared humans. The voice came in on a black ripple across space, its ship an obsidian sphere humming. With extinction code, where it passed, matter decayed, memory dissolved. It would not conquer. It would erase. Rosalind's voice cracked through what remained of the calms. "It's coming, Rian. It's heading for the core." He nodded, pulling himself to his feet. "Then so am I." They tried to evacuate. They failed. The Ashfall's jump drive had been fried by entropy resonance. The team Harlan, Cora, the priest, and Sella gathered inside the shattered vault as the tremors began. Rian stood in the center, veins glowing with residual light from the veil. "We're not fast enough," Harlan said. That thing hits us, we're memory dust. That we give it something it won't forget. Rian replied. He reached into the neural relay port and gripped the shard of the core, now fused to his armor. It's not just data, it's story, and story only dies when we stop telling it. He looked at Sela. You said they taught you how to kill a human. She nodded. Then show them what it means to stand beside one. As the voice of Unmaking entered Ekarth's upper orbit, the planet trembled with reality fractures. Light bent, gravity twisted. The last remnants of the station buckled. Walls wept blood as corrupted memory fields tried to delete entire species' histories. Rian activated the Veil's final stage. The Helix core responded to his blood, to the scream in his DNA, pain, legacy, loss. A surge of impossible code erupted. Skyward, not a weapon, but a signal, broadcast through the stars, beyond language. A song of mourning and fury and love, a map of what it meant to be us. He linked Rosalind's fragments into the stream, then Ken, then Harlan's own cortical. Echoes. And then he stepped into the grav lift that would carry him to the final deck. Where are you going? Cora cried. To make it listen, the final confrontation was not a battle. It was a conversation etched in death. Rian rose into the sky atop the lift's broken remains as the voice of Unmaking descended. Its body was an anti-shape, a silhouette burned against stars that shouldn't exist. It didn't speak in words, but pulses commands to forget, to collapse, to void. But Rian spoke back, and his voice reached across the fabric of reality. We are the ones you tried to silence. We are every scream you buried, every laugh you outlawed. We are not here to survive. We are here to be remembered. The voice lashed out, its void tendrils cracking space, reality shredding like parchment. But the core flared in response, and for a moment, the sky burned white. Memory surged through the galaxy like a second Big Bang. On Larry Prime, a child looked up and saw a human face in the stars. On a fringe moon, a rebel scientist heard her father's last words for the first time, and in the hearts of billions, something changed. They remembered not just what the humans were, but what the Larry tried to hide. Below, the Helix core began collapsing, not in destruction, but in completion. A final burst of signal erupted outward, fracturing the voice of Unmaking's form. The ancient construct paused, then it screamed, a soundless, psychic howl, and it disappeared, erased by the very thing it came to erase. Rian never returned. They say his body fused with the core. Others say he became the signal itself woven into the myths of hundreds of species. But Sela remembered. She stood on the remnants of Ekarthus, looking out over the field of fire and stars and memory. She whispered what he said. We are not here to survive. We are here to be remembered. There are stars that still carry his voice. Know his defiance. Know his humanity. Archive fragment. Recovered post-Veil broadcast that came to burn what remained of humanity's spark. The Tleri Conclave assembled what they called the cleansing Armada 12 Dread Suns tethered to gravitic engines. Ringed by planetary eradicators, black fleets 1,000 strong. Not to conquer, not even to punish. To obliterate. To snuff out every echo the Ashen Veil had unleashed. The broadcasts, the images, the songs, the defiance that had already lit fires in the minds of alien citizens and low-born scholars. But they were delayed. Rian's transmission, flung by the core, had reached deeper than data. It had rewritten story. Now, even in the hearts of the Thlarius own young, humanity had become something else. Not prey, not pestilence, but legend. From a shattered mining station on the edge of a dead belt, Harlan made his stand. Rebuilt from bone to blood to steel, the old soldier now wore the war-like armor. Beside him stood what was left of the crew, Cora with her makeshift warframe of scrap and fire. Father Yelen, whose prayers now ended with let them remember. And Sela the alien child no longer child, her eyes lit with the fury of remembered truth. They had one ship, one signal beacon, one last pulse of the Ashen Veil's code, and they had humanity's final message. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't encrypted. It played on every open frequency. We are not here to survive you. We are here to outlast your forgetting. The first wave of Clary ships broke orbit over the Perseus Drift. The beacon pulsed, and the stars answered. From the edge of nothing, ships appeared, not Terran, not military, not even coordinated, just human. Junk barges strung with coilguns. Refugee ships welded into rams. Long-haul freighters turned into kinetic missile. Slayings, each bearing scars, each carrying memories, each flying no flag, but a name painted in fire. Rosalind's ghost, Mercer's cry, Ken's spine. Rian lives, over 100 ships, no fleet, no command, just humans. Who heard the call? They struck with the fury of grief-given purpose. Harlan led the charge, not because he was the strongest, but because he remembered why they fought. On the intercom, his voice cracked through holes and minds. This is for the children they dissected in orbitals. This is for the colonies they fed to the dark. This is for the whisperers, the rebels, the runners, the storytellers. This is for Earth, not the dirt. The idea. They rammed the first Dread Sun with 3 freighters wired to detonate on atmospheric breach. The shockwave rippled across the Clary line. Engines stuttered. Shields collapsed. And then came the second wave. More ships, aliens this time. A pack of Ishen-bark vessels. Flashing signals of solidarity, independent Medj salvagers flying. Under black flags, even defectors low-born Larry scholars who had heard the veil and believed. One ship broadcast a simple phrase in over 1,000 languages. Let them be remembered. But it wasn't enough. Not against the Conclave's core-breaker, a ship so large it pulled its own moons into orbit. As it opened its annihilation lattice, preparing to atomize everything within 1,000 kilometers. The stars dimmed, even memory trembled. Then, Sela stepped forward. She stood at the precipice of the broken command deck, Rian's neural shard in her hand, her eyes full of storm. She activated it. Veil node detected. User, Sela, gene hybrid authorized. The core responded with a low hum, and she spoke into every frequency the enemy used. You taught us how to kill a human, but you never asked why. We kept standing back up. The shard glowed white hot. Activate human protocol. Resonant remembrance? Why? And she didn't hesitate. Yes, the pulse was not destructive. It was declarative. Across space, ships froze not from damage, but from shock. Every sensor, every mind-linked interface, every consciousness-enhanced crew saw the same thing. Humanity, not armies, but stories. A mother huddled with her children under the scorched sky of Europa Prime. A boy drawing stars and dust on the deck of a refugee barge. An old man laughing as the first alien stepped on Terran soil. A girl who survived being dissected because her heart wouldn't stop beating. Billions of flickers, moments, breaths, pain and poetry, sorrow and song, and through it all, Rian's voice. Not angry, not screaming, just true. You cannot kill us, because you cannot unmake what we mean to each other. The codebreaker hesitated. It felt it, somewhere deep in its design, in the subcode borrowed from the first contact wars. Something remembered. Fear, not of death, but of legacy, and it stopped. For the first time in the Conclave's reign, the killing machine shut itself down. Sela fell to her knees. The shard burned into her palm. Harlan caught her, eyes wide. It listened. She whispered, "No." He said, "It finally heard us." Across the front, the remaining Clary fleets began to break formation. Some fought on blindly, but many turned. Some broadcasted surrender. Others fled into deep space, and behind them, the void filled with lights, ships, more human survivors, and those who now chose to fight beside them. The tide had turned, not with a weapon, but with a story so powerful, even extinction had to listen. The stars do not weep, they remember. Inscription on the edge of the Helix memorial ring, orbiting what was once Ekarthus. The war didn't end with a bang. It unraveled like old cloth, thread by thread, after the veil pulse fractured. The Clary war mind, the Conclave collapsed under the weight of its own illusions. For centuries they had ruled by deletion, rewriting history, silencing planets, turning memory into a weapon. Now they faced something they could not overwrite. Truth. The resonant remembrance code spread like wild starlight across 1,000 worlds. Suppressed records bloomed in open air. At first, only among the French smugglers, memory brokers, scavenger poets. Then the younger ones began to listen. Then they began to ask, and when tyrants couldn't answer, the people began to rise. Sela was the last to leave Ekarthus. The world had collapsed into itself, half asteroid, half shrine, but she remained, alone in orbit, watching the fragments spin, not mourning, bearing witness. She carried Rian's neural shard still fused to her palm. The lines burned into her skin like ancient script. He was gone, his body never found, his signal never heard again. But he wasn't truly lost. In a sense, he was everywhere now. Whispers, in Jumpstream winds, Ghost in Data Phone. His final broadcast etched into the background hum of subspace like cosmic dust, a message that could never be erased. We are not here to survive you. We are here to be remembered. In the years that followed, humanity did not rebuild an empire. They rebuilt a presence. They did not conquer new planets. They seeded stories. They did not return to rule. They returned to connect. The Helix. A cord was signed aboard the salvaged husk of the Ashfall, now a floating cathedral of remembrance. Not a military treaty, not a surrender, a vow. Humanity would not become what had nearly destroyed them. They would not dominate, colonize, or erase, but neither would they fade. The Ashen Veil became a cultural covenant, a shared vault of memory, accessible by any species willing to listen, updated with every war survived, every love endured, every child's voice recorded in the silence after loss, and every year, on the date Rian vanished into light, the network pulsed with a single phrase in every known language. Let us not forget what it means to be human. Sella never took a title. Others tried. Mother of Remembrance, Veilkeeper, the Last Flame. She ignored them all. She spent her life traveling to forgotten planets, fractured satellites, border colonies where memory was still currency. She taught the young. She listened to the old. She carried the shard not as a relic, but a promise. She once told a class of alien children, Larry among them, about the first time she met a human. They asked if he was a god. She laughed, soft and distant. No, she said. He was just tired and angry and kind. They asked what he taught her. She looked out the window toward the stars still spinning and said that the smallest voice can shake the sky. On a dead moon where the Larry once built machines of extinction, a new monument was raised, not of stone, but of signal. A standard broadcast, infinite loop, clips of lost Terran laughter. The last lullaby sung by a mother on Titan, the sound of waves, the voice of Ava Roslin reading a poem, the names of every colony lost, the words Rian whispered when the core opened. I remember. No grand inscription, no flag, only a title etched in the universal tongue. He spoke after. Generations passed. The Helix Accord grew into something more in ethos. Aliens and humans alike became carriers of memory across galaxies. A child in one species could learn the cradle songs of another. Wars were not forgotten. They were read old so. They would never be repeated, and though humanity never again rose as an empire, it became something greater, a keeper of legacy, a guardian of grief, a torchbearer for those afraid to be forgotten. And then, one cycle, long after the last Earthburn died, a signal arrived from deep beyond the Perseus Rift, a pulse of familiar code, scrambled, broken, but unmistakable. Helix transmission, origin, unknown source match, 99.8%. Rian Voss Sella was long gone, but others answered. They triangulated the signal, chased it through wormholes and ancient jump gates, through systems no longer charted. And what they found was not a man, but a monument made of memory, a rogue station drifting in the black, covered in etched names, orbiting a dead star. Inside, a single chamber, a hologram, frozen mid-breath, Rian, kneeling, reaching out, and his voice, I'm still here. The galaxy watched, listened, cried, and they updated the Helix, not as a tomb, but as a beginning, because some fires don't burn out. They become stars, and some stories don't end. They become humanity. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human, and it never forgot.